eaten alive at a lookout will stay with me for a long time.
Brushing them gently off their skin.
We were so poor as kids that the only game we had was how many you could kill with one slap.
And quite a few, I imagine, was the answer. So, Auckland, so traffic very heavy out of Wellington. Auckland Transport's Chief Transport Operations Officer urging motorists to plan ahead to avoid delays as the city starts to empty tomorrow. They're expecting in Auckland, really, for the Christmas break. Is either of you travelling?
Travelling, yes, but I'm heading towards Gisborne, and as soon as you get to Tauranga, she's quiet as a mouse usually. It's good.
Yeah, that's a good road to take. How about you, Greg?
Yes, well, we're heading from Picton to the coast, and that's normally a great ride. You get no traffic until you get to the highway between Nelson and Christchurch. That's usually chocker, and then you get nothing when you go down the Buller Gorge. So I'm expecting that'll be a little different this year. It'll be nose to tail right up the Waiau Valley. You
like that Buller, don't you? You're a fan of the West Coast.
Oh, I do, especially the older I get, the stronger the draw. It's it's how we're having a take the family down there and make sure they get an understanding of where they belong. They're touring a waiwai, as it were.
Yeah, indeed. Motoring commentator Alan Dick, who we had on the other day actually, on Facebook today has been praising the amazing behaviour of truck drivers on that Lewis Pass road and letting cars pass. And apparently southern truckies have been marvellous, letting cars through, pulling over, telling convoys behind if the road's safe to overtake, and so on. Quote, not so the dim-witted drivers of cars, too many content to sit at the head of a line of cars travelling at 80k's, imposing their will on other road users, never using rear vision mirrors. Even after accepting the courtesy of a truck driver, they didn't have the intelligence to work out they needed to do the same. Pull over, let the other cars pass. Has our driving got worse? Everybody says it has around the nation's dining room tables, but is it right? What do you reckon?
Well, there's more of us driving now, so how's that ratio work? So there's greater chance for more idiots on the road, but I think we're definitely less patient.
There's a special place reserved in hell for those who drive slowly and then when they get to a passing lane or a straight bit of road, go to 109 kilometres an hour.
Because there might be someone slow just ahead, Greg.
Yes, and those people, there is no torture that's been devised by Dracula or anyone else that is sufficient for those people.
We were talking about the power of cars and the fact that, you can't govern the vehicles in New Zealand because it would be impractical to keep everybody in cars that only did 100k's. And panellist Wendell Nissen said this was only a concern of men, the issue of buying cars for their grunt. And listeners disagreed. And Pamela, for example, says that I hear someone say that only men are interested in the power of a car. You're joking, aren't you? And then other people texted about young women drivers, especially driving fast in New Zealand these days. Have you noticed that? The young women, a new breed of fast driver.
Oh, I mean, I think speed can be indiscriminate, and you often get quite surprised when you say, "Who's that coming up behind me?" And you catch them out the corner of your eye, and it'll be, as you say, it could be well be a young woman or sometimes really old people, and you're like, "How fast are you going?"
So it's gender neutral, age neutral.
Oh, I wonder if it comes back more to the quality of the cars now because we are so better insulated in our little bubbles. I mean, I know in my rattly old ute, as soon as I get over 80k's, it lets me know.
You feel it.
Oh, I think women tend to be. It's not so much bad driving; it's more inconsiderate driving. Most of the really bad driving you get, generally when you look at it, it's young males or old men in cloth caps.
Greg O'Connor, Clark Gayford, have a lovely Christmas, both of you.
You too, Jim. Thank you for having us.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. We're back with the last panel of the year tomorrow.
Kia ora everyone, I'm Rowan Quinn, and on behalf of our excellent team, haere mai, welcome to Checkpoint here on RNZ National. Tonight, 3 generations of one family are killed and 3 injured after a fire in the Auckland suburb of Flatbush. Shocked neighbours tell us they were woken in the middle of the night to the sound of shattering glass as windows exploded, and survivors fled the burning house. Also tonight, an Auckland barista has made his last coffee and shut his cafe doors for the final time, saying construction around the Auckland City rail link has put him out of business. Wanted posters go up across Europe for a 24-year-old Tunisian man named as the main suspect in the Berlin Christmas market attack.
RNZ News at 5. No mai, haere mai. Good afternoon. I'm Paul Brennan. Family and friends have gathered at the bedside of a man who is fighting for his life after a fatal house fire in Auckland early this morning. The police say 2 women, aged 66 and 39, and a 5-year-old boy were killed in the fire in the suburb of Flatbush. Sally Murphy reports.
A 47-year-old man, Kailesh Tana Balasingham, is in a critical condition in hospital, while an 11-year-old girl and an older man are in a stable condition. The president of the Refugee Council, Arif Saeed, says Mr Tana Balasingham is a council member. Mr Saeed says his family and friends have gathered at Middlemore Hospital. The fire service is investigating the cause of the blaze. In Auckland, Sally Murphy.
The Earthquake and Tsunami Monitoring Service Geonet has received a $3 million funding boost. The government says the extra money is to enhance Geonet's natural hazards monitoring capability and response service. After last month's 7.8 magnitude earthquake, Geonet's director Ken Gledhill called for more funding so the service could be staffed 24/7. Dr Gledhill said it could not give tsunami warnings as quickly and accurately as he would like because it was not staffed overnight or on the weekends. At the time, the Civil Defence Minister, Jerry Brownlee, described the funding request as an unreasonable criticism. But today, Mr Brownlee announced the new funding and said planning work is underway for a 24/7 warning centre. The fast-growing economy is expected to push on into next year. The economy grew 1.1% in the 3 months to September and 3.5% for the year, its strongest since the end of 2014. It's been driven by robust household spending and a booming building sector, underpinned by record immigration. Auckland architect Pip Cheshire says he and his competitors are flat out with houses and commercial work.
Those areas in particular are going like hammers of hell. What that means for us is quite long forward orders, so we can see that we're going to be busy for 8 months, for a year or so, and I don't believe that we're unusual at all. I think that most practices would say the same thing.
Pip Cheshire there. The AA says Caltex Australia's purchase of the New Zealand fuel company Gull could increase competition and lower prices in parts of the country. The $340 million deal, subject to regulatory approval, would see Caltex take over Gull's Mount Maunganui fuel terminal as well as Gull retail outlets. Caltex says it would retain the Gull brand along with the company's management and employees. An AA senior analyst, Mark Stockdale, says drivers would also expect Gull to keep its lower prices, which tend to force competitors in the area to drop fuel prices too.
And there's actually potentially an upside in that if Gull can actually expand as a result of the new owner and into the Wellington and South Island, then that actually means that potentially over 1 million motorists will be able to enjoy lower fuel prices than they currently do.
Mark Stockdale says the deal is different to the Z takeover of Caltex New Zealand, where one operator absorbed another. Small businesses in Auckland say they're having to close for good due to a major rail development being built outside their doors. Construction of the $3 billion Auckland City rail link along Albert Street will continue until 2019. But Gabor Florovitz, who owns a cafe on the street, Caffeine, says the roadworks are costing him custom and he has to close down. He says he's been asking the Auckland Council for compensation for weeks without success. And you can hear more on this story on Checkpoint right after the news. Figures from NetSafe's new hotline have revealed more than 75% of online harassment complaints it's had relate to people over the age of 18. The government-funded hotline started operating late last month and is aimed at helping combat cyberbullying and abuse under the Harmful Digital Communications Act. NetSafe's Chief Executive Martin Cocker says the numbers aren't surprising, though he thinks only a fraction of incidents are being reported.
The people who are calling us reflect the demographic of New Zealand, and people suffer a range of online abuse and harassment. And I'm sure that over time, as we get larger numbers of cases, we'll be able to spot trends in terms of who is affected by what type of harassment.
Martin Cocker of NetSafe there. It's 4.5 minutes past 5. On to sport now. The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen is hopeful prop Owen Franks re-signing with New Zealand Rugby and the Crusaders will entice other off-contract players to do the same. Franks, who turns 29 tomorrow, is the second most capped All Black prop of all time and has signed on to stay until the 2019 World Cup in Japan. The contracts of fellow All Blacks Israel Dagg, Aaron Cruden and Ben Smith finish at the end of next year. They've been offered big money by overseas clubs, but Hansen remains hopeful at least 2 of them will stay until 2019.
You know, all of them are signed obviously for the Lions, so we're not going to lose anyone before that. But after that, there's a desire to continue with this group, I think, and to try and do something that no one's done before. And it's those types of challenges that inspire players to want to stay. So hopefully we'll have everyone sign up.
The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen there. The Bangladesh cricketers have made a solid start to their tour of New Zealand, reaching 245 for 8 of 43 overs in their one-day match against the New Zealand 11 in Whangarei. Mohammad Mahmudullah was the pick of the Bangladeshi batsman, making 43. The Black Caps' first one-day international against Bangladesh is on Boxing Day. The newly formed Northern Stars netball side has confirmed its home base for next year's inaugural ANZ Premiership competition. The Stars will play 5 of their 6 home games at the Vodafone Event Centre in Manukau, although their main training base will be in Papakura. And that's the news.
Tonight on Nights, the Mormon Connection. I speak with Bev Whippy, who's part of the largest Polynesian diaspora outside the Pacific in Salt Lake City, deep in the heart of the American West. How are they preparing for Christmas? Further east, this week's cultural ambassador, Paul Barrington, aka DJ Below, talks about Detroit's second wave. And there's a summer sonic tonic dedicated to travel on Nights with me, Brian Crump, after the headlines at 6:30 on RNZ National.
Weather now, we have the Met Service short forecast for the country taking us through to midnight tomorrow, Friday, updated about an hour ago. Northland to Whanganui, including Coromandel, Bay of Plenty and the Central High Country. A few showers, possibly heavy about now this afternoon and turning to rain tonight. A strong southwesterly change tomorrow morning will bring showery weather to most places. Manawatu down to Wellington, isolated showers turning to rain tonight. A strong southwesterly change tomorrow will bring showers in the morning. Gisborne to Wairarapa, a few showers, especially about the ranges, possibly heavy and thundery tomorrow with hail. And strong southwesterlies coming through with a change in Wairarapa tomorrow. Marlborough, Nelson and Buller, rain with heavy falls clearing this evening and a few showers tomorrow. Some could be heavy. Canterbury, Otago and Southland, scattered showers afternoon and evening today. Possibly heavy and thundery with hail. Westland mainly fine today, scattered showers tomorrow, however. Fiordland showers, possibly heavy, easing tomorrow. And at the Chathams, it will be cloudy. Rain develops tomorrow evening. It is 8 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Paul. A 5-year-old boy and 2 women aged 66 and 39 have died in a house fire in South Auckland overnight. 3 other family members escaped. One of the survivors, Kailesh Tanabalasingham, who's a member of the Refugee Council, is in a critical condition in Middlemore Hospital, while an 11-year-old girl and an older male are in a stable condition. People who lived near the house in Flatbush say the family's Sri Lankan and they often saw the young boy playing outside in the street with other children from the neighbourhood. Joanna McKenzie reports.
Throughout the morning, people who live on Plantation Avenue gathered in small groups at the cordon talking about what happened overnight. 15-year-old Rishav Narayan lives down the street from the house.
As soon as my mum woke me up, we both went outside and we walked up to as far as we could get, which was the cones. We saw so many lights. Like, it's not those are not the red lights you want to see at this type of time right now, but we saw fire trucks, we saw ambulances, and we saw a rescue team there. But we couldn't go any further than what we could, so that's all we could see. And smoke was still coming out.
Rishav Narayan's mother, Hem, was the first in their house to wake up.
I woke up my husband and I said to him, there's a fire, and he couldn't really see because he never had glasses on, but I just saw flames. Yeah, and then I saw a ball of fire, that's all, and then I woke up my son and then we all ran out.
Emergency services were called just before 3:30 and took only a few minutes to get to the scene. But when they arrived, the house was engulfed in flames and windows had been blown out of their frames. Jeremy Edwards lives on the opposite side of the street and was woken by the fire engines.
I went downstairs to have a look, and when I went out the door, I saw this huge cloud of smoke and people standing out in the street across the road from the burning house. So I went down to a group of people and had a little chat to them, and they said there were people still trapped inside the house.
Jeremy's housemate Krista Stone says she doesn't know the parents, but she knew the small boy who lived at the house.
Just the little kids, just cycling up and down, because quite a few of the kids up here like friendly with each other, typical little kids. So yeah, they'd just bike up and down with each other, and yeah, just kind of sad because going to be one or maybe 2 less.
A woman whose parents lived next door to the house came to check on them and told RNZ News they're devastated by what's happened. She says the family was Sri Lankan and kept to themselves but were very nice. Another neighbour 2 doors along says he often saw the children playing cricket and helping their dad mow the lawn. An 11-year-old girl escaped the fire with a 69-year-old man and both are stable at Middlemore Hospital. A 47-year-old man has been undergoing surgery and is in a critical condition. In Auckland for Checkpoint, called Joanna Mackenzie-Tene.
Well, Deborah Manning is a family friend of Kailesh Tanabalasingam. She spent time with him at Middlemore Hospital today and joins me now. Thanks for talking to us, Deborah. How is he doing?
Well, he should just be coming out of theatre now. He's been in surgery all day as he's been critically injured in the fire. And so we haven't been able to speak with him yet. We're hoping to be able to see him this evening. But obviously he's very unwell.
And Deborah, do you know how the other survivors are doing?
They're in just a state of shock, trauma, grief and devastation. So he's survived by his 11-year-old daughter and his father-in-law was also in the house last night.
Do you know what sort of support the family has been receiving from the community?
Yes, I was at the hospital today, and so the community, of course, as you would expect, were there. Kailesh is very beloved by his community because he's given so much to the Sri Lankan community and to people on a personal level. And he's also got family coming in as well to see him from overseas.
Deborah, can you tell us a little bit about Mr Tanabalasingam's work that he does for the Refugee Council?
Yeah, sure. So Kailesh is the Secretary of the Refugee Council of New Zealand, and we've been working together for many years. He's a tireless advocate of people's rights, and just is one of those people that works behind the scenes. He's very principled. He will never back down from what he believes in is right, but is also very wise with it and very personable with a great sense of humour. And that's what I've been thinking about today. His cheeky smile in meetings whenever we're, after finishing discussing a very difficult issue, there's always Kailesh with a smile and getting us into the kitchen to have a cup of tea afterwards.
Thanks very much, Deborah, for talking to us today. That's Deborah Manning, who's a family friend of Kailesh Tanabalasingam, one of the survivors of that devastating fire in South Auckland this morning. The building boom and bumper household spending have driven faster than expected economic growth. Official figures show gross domestic product, which is a broad measure of the health of the economy, grew 1.1% in the 3 months to September and 3.5% for the year, its strongest since the end of 2014. Our economics correspondent Patrick O'Mara reports.
Household spending continued to grow thanks to a rising population, with more people going away, eating out and partaking in leisure activities. A spokesperson with the electronic payments company Paymark, Paul Brislin, says that trend has continued, with spending in December up 7% to $4.2 billion in the first 3 weeks of December.
There are very few sectors that aren't seeing an increase of at least single digits, if not double. So that says that there is broad confidence in the way the economy is running at the moment, and certainly in people's willingness to spend.
The housing market also helped propel the economy, with construction continuing to surge. That boosted activity in services, with demand for architects and engineers experiencing their biggest jump in nearly 9 years. Auckland architect Pip Shesha says he and his competitors are flat out.
Those areas in particular are going like hammers of hell. What that means for us is quite long forward orders, so we can see that we're going to be busy for 8 months or a year or so, and I don't believe that we're unusual at all. I think that most practices would say the same thing.
But not all parts of the economy are humming. Agriculture production declined, led by falls in milk supply, while exports edged down on the back of lower meat prices. And while there are signs that people are getting a bigger piece of the growing economic pie, the Director of Economic Research at FNZC, Chris Green, says record immigration continues to dominate the economy's momentum.
On a GDP per capita basis, trying to take account of some of that population increase, you get a much more modest quarterly increase of only 0.6, and the annual rate goes down from 3.5 down to 1.4, which is actually below its long-run trend. So I think that really does underlie just how much of this growth is being generated by population growth.
The current account figures, which also came out today, also reiterated some weak points for the economy. The net international liability position, an indicator of indebtedness, again rose, and that's likely to rise further with global funding costs on the rise. Nevertheless, New Zealand continues to outperform many other developed nations, including Australia, the United States and Euro area. It has some economists wondering whether the faster-growing economy will force the Reserve Bank to raise interest rates next year earlier than assumed. For Checkpoint, Patrick O'Mara.
Wanted posters have gone up across Europe for a 24-year-old Tunisian man named as the main suspect in the Berlin Christmas market attack. It's believed Anis Amri was driving the truck which ploughed into revellers, killing 12 and injuring up to 50. But as Jenny Hill reports, after authorities arrested the wrong man, Amri got a good 24-hour head start on investigators.
Europe's most wanted man, Anis Amri, the only suspect in the investigation into an attack which shattered Germany. Prosecutors warn he may be armed, dangerous, and they're offering a €100,000 reward.
There's a new suspect. We are searching for him. We'll keep investigating every lead. We issued a warrant for this suspect's arrest at midnight. The warrant covers the whole of Germany and most of Europe.
We're learning more about the 24-year-old Tunisian. He arrived in Germany last year. He was refused asylum, but granted temporary leave to stay. The security services admit he was known to them, considered a threat because of his links to one of Germany's most notorious Islamist networks. And he'll be hard to find. He used 6 different names and 3 nationalities.
This person attracted the attention of several security services in Germany through his contact with a radical Islamist.
The hijacked lorry is yielding grim evidence. Documents leading to the suspect and DNA. It's thought Amri fought with the man who should have been behind the wheel before shooting him dead. But it was 24 hours before police identified him as a suspect. First, they arrested and released an innocent man, giving Amri a vital head start. Today, flowers for the dead, prayers for the injured. The German foreign minister was joined at the scene of the attack by his Italian counterpart. Among those missing and feared dead, Fabrizia Di Lorenzo, who comes from L'Aquila. Dalia El-Kayam, who's from Israel, also hasn't been seen since the attack. Her husband Rami is seriously ill in hospital. A time perhaps for faith. Tonight, a spontaneous gathering at a Berlin synagogue.
The ceremony was extremely important because this attack was not an attack on Berlin or on Germany. It was not an attack on Jews or on Christians. This was an attack on all of us.
Across the city, a vigil of a different kind. The attack, the arrest warrant have reignited a national debate. The anti-immigrant party Alternative für Deutschland blame Angela Merkel and her refugee policy for this attack.
Do you blame Angela Merkel for what happened?
Angela Merkel ist eine sehr humanistisch denkende Frau.
Angela Merkel, she says, is a humanitarian woman. She did the right thing a year ago. No one could know this would happen.
We are a free world, and if we want to stay free, things like this will happen.
This country feels nervous. Extra security for Christmas markets. After all, Amri is still at large.
Auckland City Rail link may not just be costing rate and taxpayers, it may also be costing small businesses. Some stores around the construction of the $3 billion project are asking for compensation from Auckland Transport, saying they're suffering financially due to a lack of foot traffic. And as Zach Fleming found out, one cafe owner's closed his doors for the last time.
That's one of the last coffees Gabor Florovitz and Kyra Cheng will make in their Auckland cafe. On Albert Street, surrounded by construction for the City Rail link, they're closing for good today.
Everyone is struggling here in the area. 80 and the council should be proactive from day one. They should have implemented a rent supplement, if you like, or a plan, and being proactive. and small businesses like us could have survived.
Mr. Florovitz says his cafe, Caffeine, is doing about half the amount of coffees it usually does this time of year. He put through a request to Auckland Transport for compensation 3 months ago.
They promised to come back and give us a proper feedback within 20 working days. They didn't. And I haven't heard from them since.
And they promised to get back to you Monday this week, and it's now Thursday and you still haven't heard?
I still haven't heard. And actually they promised to multiply times, so yeah, probably like 3-4 times within 5 days, yeah.
And if they had have got back to you earlier, you may have been able to stay open?
Yes, we could have survived.
At one point, he had to pause our interview to compose himself, tears welling in his eyes. Carol Greensmith, spokeswoman for City Rail Link, says the project's so far had 4 businesses get in touch, saying they're struggling because of CRL construction. But she doubts the CRL is solely at fault for Caffeine's slowdown.
The City Rail Link is only one thing that's going on around our city. So let's just take Albert Street for a start. That particular business you're referring to is immediately opposite the New Zealand Herald site, the NZME site. So that was purchased by a developer, and the entire NZME business disappeared out of Albert Street and didn't have anything to do with the City Rail Link. And I imagine there are a large number of coffee-drinking journalists there who probably helped keep that business afloat.
Ms Greensmith says the CRL team has done lots to try and minimise the impact to businesses.
We have put in a lot of signage. We put in signs about Victoria Street, businesses being open as usual, Wellesley Street, Swanson, etc., etc. We publicise them, we put their logos on our hoardings, we feature them in our newsletter.
I spoke to one of Caffeine's regulars this afternoon. John Lowther runs a virtual reality business just up the road from the cafe.
Probably easier to get around Syria. I mean, what's happened here in Auckland is kind of reprehensible from the point of view that local operators don't appear to have been consulted. These guys here losing, a business, $100,000. There's no way for them to find it back again. They work very hard here. And it just seems, entirely unfair.
Mr. Florovitz says it may be too late for him, but he hopes other businesses can stay open until construction ends on Albert Street in around 2 years' time.
They should treat businesses here as it belong to them, as it something like they manage, and their livelihood would depend on it.
For Checkpoint, Zach Fleming.
Advocates of Auckland's troubled St James Theatre are calling on the government to fund the final stages of its restoration to bring it back into public use. A developer's pulled the plug on the construction of 300 apartments attached to the site, and the parallel restoration of the historic St James Theatre is also now uncertain. Eva Collette reports.
There's a fraction. There's a fraction. There's a fraction, too much friction.
A live recording of Tim Finn playing at the St James Theatre in 2001. From local music royalty to major international stars, the St James has hosted them all, and it's considered by many to be a jewel in Auckland's crown. But the developer, Reliance Holdings, has pulled a development project on the same site as the theatre after it failed to secure funding. The company intends to honour its commitment to complete structural and seismic work on the St James. The Auckland Council has pledged $15 million towards the restoration, but the agreement is yet to be finalised. The spokesperson for Save the St James Group, Tina Plunkett, says it's another blow in the step to ensuring the theatre is saved and opened to public.
The developers and people that I have talked to have definitely been trying to paint a rosy picture and say, no, we're in conversation with others and this is definitely not a definite full stop. But it's been so many years in process that it's just another delay for the actual theatre, regardless of what happens with the apartments.
Ms Plunkett says the Trust is seeking a commitment from the Ministry of Culture and Heritage to open up its Heritage Fund.
The National Heritage Fund has been set up in a way that it wasn't able to create the funding for the St James with such a important heritage building and smack in the middle of the arts district in Auckland. I'm wondering, if not for that building, what is the National Heritage Fund really set up for?
The Auckland Notable Property Trust owns the theatre, and director Steve Beelby says they need more than $10 million from the government to get the project over the line. But Mr Beelby says securing funding is difficult because the trust is privately owned and doesn't automatically qualify within the traditional philanthropic structure. He says a ministerial grant outside of the normal funding scope would be needed. Mr Beelby says while the Minister for Arts, Culture and Heritage, Maggie Barry, has shown some interest, there has been no commitment yet. The Labour MP for Central Auckland and spokesperson for Arts, Culture and Heritage, Jacinda Ardern, says Maggie Barry gave the impression the government would assist, but has since been quiet.
All anyone ever asked central government to do was to have an open mind and to think creatively about whether there was a way that there could be a contribution. You know, anything from, for instance, allowing a GST write-off for the redevelopment. There was no set notion from anyone on the St James side that there was only one way to fix or resolve this problem.
A heritage building consultant, Alan Matson, says the theatre is a long-term asset and Auckland Council could also be committing further funds.
They could put their thinking caps on and find some way to do it, and if it needs to be amortised over a longer period, then so be it. You can't have it languishing forever. We've got certainly the demand for it and from many realms of the artistic world.
A spokesperson for the Ministry of Heritage and Culture says it hasn't received an application for funding for the St James Theatre. They say ministry officials are in contact with Mr Beelby and will continue discussions in the new year. I tamaki makaurau mo te hōtaka o te ahiahi, ko Eva Colette tēnei.
Hopes that the future of Christchurch's quake-damaged cathedral would be finally decided before Christmas have been dashed, with a decision now pushed into 2017. Cabinet discussed the cathedral's future on Tuesday, but a promised announcement this week has hit the skids, with news today that there would be, well, no news. Conan Young reports.
In an effort to break the deadlock, the government set up the Cathedral Working Group to come up with options for restoring the Garden City's most recognisable building. Its report was presented to the government and the church a month ago. Bishop Victoria Matthews declined to comment, but said in a statement she was saddened by the delay in the announcement. She said 48 hours ago she and the church property trustees were sure there would be a positive announcement before Christmas.
The trustees will keep working towards a resolution in the new year. I can assure people that there will be a cathedral in the square at the heart of our city.
I asked people attending a Christmas service at the temporary cathedral what they made of yet another delay in deciding the building's future. Don Wethy said it wasn't good enough.
Oh yeah, it's a shocker. Yeah, absolute shocker. But anyway, hopefully natural justice will prevail in the new year and that they can move on.
What would you like to see happen there?
I think we've got to go for a new cathedral. Yep, we've got to build something that moves with the times. Good, strong cathedral, lightweight, people feel secure in it. After all, it's a place of worship, and we can't be mucking around with hunks of basalt falling on people in the future.
Jan Duncan thinks a new cathedral would help lift what is now a very sad part of the city.
I really like how in Melbourne they combine the old buildings with new, and I think the cathedral would be perfect. Like keep as much of the old structure as possible and then, add a new structure that fits in with it.
Dutchman Eric Clavelbacht said it was a matter of priorities.
It's all about the money, I guess. So, and we were for the first time here, and there's so much destruction. So I can imagine they have to make choices. So, but I hope they will build it. It would be a shame if they don't.
Mari Bianco said she'd like to see the cathedral rebuilt where it is.
But I guess in what form would depend on what's going to be economic, really. I think that would be my theory on the cathedral. I'd love to see it back in the square, though, for sure.
So you think the cost is a factor?
Yeah, I definitely think it needs to be considered because there's a lot of other parts of Christchurch that need some money as well spent. So I think it's got to be realistic, but I think it would be nice to at least see some of the stone reused. Yeah.
And so what do you make of the fact we're almost 6 years on now, aren't we, from the earthquake? I mean, the fact we haven't...
It's been a very long time, and I think a decision needs to be made one way or the other.
How do you feel when you're sort of in that part of town at the moment with the cathedral the way it is?
It's looking pretty awful, isn't it? And I think it's such a centrepiece for Christchurch that I think it really needs to be decided and then people can move on, because just living in this limbo is not really not really good for anyone.
The minister supporting Greater Christchurch Regeneration, Jerry Brownlee, declined to be interviewed but also expressed hope of a breakthrough next year. In Ototahi for Checkpoint, ko Konanyang tēnei.
Coming up, John Campbell looks back at some of the biggest news stories of 2016. But first, here's Paul Brennan with the headlines.
Thank you, Rowan. In our headlines this afternoon, family and friends are at the bedside of a man fighting for his life after a fatal house fire in Auckland early this morning. The police say a 5-year-old boy and 2 women aged 66 and 39 died in the fire in the suburb of Flatbush. A 47-year-old man is in a critical condition in hospital, and an 11-year-old girl and an older male are stable. The Earthquake and Tsunami Monitoring Service Geonet has received a $3 million funding boost. After last month's 7.8 magnitude earthquake, Geonet called for more funding so the service could be staffed around the clock and give tsunami warnings more quickly and accurately. The Civil Defence Minister, Jerry Brownlee, refused the request at the time, but today announced the new funding and said planning is underway for a 24/7 warning centre. Excuse me. The fast-growing economy is expected to continue into next year. The economy grew 1.1% in the 3 months to September and 3.5% for the year, its strongest pace since 2014. The growth has been driven by robust household spending and a booming building sector underpinned by record immigration. It's emerged that a Tunisian asylum seeker named as a suspect in the Berlin truck attack was under surveillance earlier this year. Anis Amri was suspected of planning to buy guns for a possible terror attack, but monitoring was stopped for lack of evidence. He's now the subject of a Europe-wide manhunt after his residence permit was found in the truck that ploughed through a Christmas market, killing 12 people. A Canadian woman and her cat have been turned around at the New Zealand border and put on the next flight home. The Ministry for Primary Industries says the woman declared her dirty boots when she arrived at Auckland Airport from Vancouver, but not the cat hidden in her handbag. The woman only revealed she was carrying the cat when authorities told her they would subject her baggage to further biosecurity checks. Those are our headlines. Our next news and sport update will be at 6.
Kia ora everyone, we are looking back, as we have been all week, over 2016. And one of the big losses for New Zealand this year was the death of former CTU President Helen, who passed away in October after a long, brave fight with cancer. The lifelong unionist and, of course, in recent years, medicinal cannabis crusader, was remembered for her long-running campaigns to improve workplace health and safety in sectors such as forestry and farming and mining. Tremendous improvements over the past few years. She would say, of course, there was still a way to go, but boy, a distance had been travelled. In August, I went to her home in Wellington, up Mount Vic, to talk to her about her life and what mattered in a place she had grown up in.
This is where I grew up and now live here, yeah. So I haven't strayed far from the
No, from, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a beautiful place. And
it's a beautiful place.
Yeah.
So this was your mum and dad's home?
Yeah, and this suburb was a very working class suburb when we were kids. You know, the local school would have been a very low decile school.
What was it? Did you go to Clyde Key?
Yeah. So we had, you know, rubbish collectors next door and wharfies up the road, and Dad was a truck driver, and yeah, and the houses were cheap, yeah.
Were you always going to become the person you became, do you think? Were you always going to be...
Well, I was always going to be political and always be active in some way like that, because that's, the whole family was political, active, you know, and still is.
And brave too, right? I mean, there's all sorts of ways of being political, isn't there? I mean, sometimes you can be described as a political person because you can hunt with the hounds and run with the hares.
Yeah.
Your dad never did that, did he?
No. And so, you know, he was a very, very hard-working trade unionist for the lowest paid cleaners and caretakers in New Zealand. And, you know, it had incredible conditions because we had a proper, decent industrial relations system. So, you know, cleaners and caretakers had a decent wage, permanent work, centrally funded from the government and schools and things. When you look at how all of that work has deteriorated, he would be heartbroken, you know, to see what's now happening with caretakers and cleaners. 16 different employers each year contracting out to lower and lower prices. You know, no permanent sort of caretakery type jobs anymore. You know, when you think of the the atmosphere that we organised in with him now, how workers are, it's quite distressing, really.
The casualisation of jobs and the farming out of contracts.
Yeah, and when someone gets a decent job now with a contract, everyone's amazed and celebrates. Oh my God, my kid's got a good job. They've got a proper contract. The employer seems to want to train them. It's like a miracle. I don't know if you've noticed that. Whereas,
yeah, I'm thinking about it. I think you're right. Yeah.
They've got an apprenticeship. How did that happen, you know? So things have really dramatically deteriorated, I think, for young workers.
Did your dad ever, because people said horrible things about your dad, did he ever sort of sit in the corner and feel sorry for himself and think, I can't go and do it again tomorrow?
They said wonderful things about him as well.
Yeah,
That's the contrast.
I'm going to come back to that.
Yeah, so he believed in what he was doing and knew that unions are essential public institutions, and without them, life is miserable. He was just, determined about that, and he was right, and he was never ashamed of the work he was doing. Yeah, so... And all learned on the job. He was a working class boy who didn't finish school and, could write a sentence which was about 5 paragraphs long without a full stop. Yeah, things like that.
Your eyes are sparkling. You're proud of him, eh?
I am proud of him. We had a very good father and mother, and my mum's still alive. She's 90, yeah. But they loved us and they included us.
And what did they make you believe in?
In equality and humanity, really. I think that everybody is of the same value. I think it was the primary thing, that when you saw somebody being treated in a way that you felt was unfair, it was because they were not being treated as a human being or as a citizen or, as an equal. And that was the analysis that we were always taught.
So that you were taught that as a child, right?
Yeah, and we were taught about South Africa, we taught about Vietnam. Our parents were very active in Vietnam. So we learned it internationally as well as locally.
You became a teacher? Briefly?
I did.
You studied law?
Yeah, I studied teaching first.
Yeah.
And because that's what people did, right? And
is that what people did, or is that what, forgive me, girls or females or young women did?
Yeah. And I wanted to be a teacher, and I loved teaching, although I only taught for a couple of years. But it's a fabulous job. I mean, it's the hardest job I'll ever do. It was harder than the CGU president's job. It was absolutely non-stop, unfinished, constant pressure to teach in a class of 7-year-olds, 37-year-olds, and keep them all busy. And you go home and you think, oh my God, if I don't teach them, they won't learn. They're only 7. What's going to happen to them? I mean, you go home and you think, I didn't even talk to that kid today. You always have this guilt and be working away and working in the weekends.
Was that about fairness?
I think it was. There was I thought, well, if they're going to spend half their life in your class for a whole year, you probably had an obligation to them to sort of move them forward and teach them. And that was a skill which you didn't really understand yourself when you were first year teaching. Yeah.
And when you became a union delegate, did that feel just right? Did that just fit?
No, it felt like typical. I'm a first year teacher and the school's going to lump me with this delegate's job. That was my first delegate's job. But I was pleased to do it because it was right in the middle of tomorrow's schools. It was right in that transition, and there was a lot of issues, and I was very interested in them. In those days, everything was structured and everyone was in the union. You had these branch meetings and that's what you did. I mean, those meetings are much more few and far between now, and they're about issues. So I think they're much more interesting. We've learned a lot about, having a topic that people, like teachers care about education, right? Yeah. Have an education union meeting about national standards or something. No, they absolutely can take it over and contribute, yeah. And so unions need to learn about how they engage workers and what the issues are that they're interested in. Yeah.
How do unions even get to workers now? I mean, how do, for example, if you're a cleaner with Spotless, and I'm not picking on Spotless for any reason, it's just the first name that came to mind, how the hell does the union get to them?
Well, this is part of the problem. We've got an industrial relations system that doesn't cover everybody, doesn't extend those international rights to all of those workers. So the forestry workers haven't got a shit show in hell. And farm workers, of having collective agreements, even though they've got the same international rights as you and me, of having access to the union, of being able to join a union easily without threat. And that is a problem with the law. And the government has deliberately just cut it down and down and down and made it harder and harder and harder. But also when the law changed in the 90s, it excluded the most vulnerable workers from coverage, and they've paid the price for it.
When you say the most vulnerable, who are you talking about explicitly?
Well, let's say, for example, forestry workers used to get 70% of the profit share, and they're now down to 30 over this period of the last 20 years. We tell the story of Charles Finlay, killed in the middle of the night, $16 an hour after 27 years in the bush. Well, what was he meant to do to change that? There's no union, there was no collective. there was no opportunity for him to collectively bargain, and his wages just went like this, and that forced him to work longer and longer and longer, and in the dark, and the forestry contract was screwed down. It's a legacy story of lack of recognition of equality and the need for people to earn a living when they're working. I mean, the deal is you go to work, you earn a living, you have a decent life, isn't it? If that's not the deal, we need to talk about it. You know, if the deal is that you get up at 4 a.m, drive into the woods in the middle of winter, and then work in the dark until someone drops a log on you, then that's not a great deal, really.
You managed to achieve something remarkable in forestry because it was a terribly unsafe business, and that's not a crass shorthand, that's a statement of fact. People were dying at an alarming rate.
It was incredible, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And no one had even noticed, and it was, you know, it was quite a weird way that I got into it, because we hadn't noticed. And after Pike, we started to say, well, what else is going on? You know, and it became transparent that this was a really big problem area, and that you know, to give credit to the forest owners, they obviously knew they were getting close to the edge of what was acceptable anyway, but they have changed.
So what was the worst year?
2012.
How many people died in forestry?
10. And there's only 6,500 people on the payroll. So of the 6,500 on the payroll in 2012, over 1,000 of them were on ACC and had been on ACC for more than a year. So and only 12 prosecutions of 900 serious harm accidents. So we just got in there, took these private prosecutions, publicised the cases, gave a voice to the widows and the mothers and the people who had lost loved ones in the forest, and then we set up this inquiry. We won the inquiry.
So someone was dying every 5 weeks.
Yeah. And in terrible circumstances, not dying in normal, nothing's normal, but, you know, just in absolutely overworked, exhausted, bad wet weather gear, wind blowing over a tree on top of them. It's endless.
And what's it fallen down to? What's the most recent year, do you know?
Well, we understand that the accident rate, we've had about two or three deaths this year, which we were disappointed in because we had this whole period, like 15 months really, with
no
nobody.
deaths. Yeah.
But it's about 70% reduced in serious harm accidents, which is sensational, right? Yeah, sensational. And I mean, but it's actually made those families angry because they now know that, you know, their people didn't have to get hurt either. There'd been this initiative. One of the families that we worked with, their dad was killed, and the 2 boys were working in the forest. 40 minutes to call in his death, even though he was still alive. It didn't ring in the didn't ring in the ambulance or the helicopter. You know, this all came out in the coroner's hearing. I mean,
40 minutes.
40 minutes was what they did in Pike, right? They left 40 minutes before they rang in the explosion. With this man when he was killed, Dave McMurtry, when he was killed, the employer didn't ring it in for 40 minutes.
And why was that, do you think?
Well, in the coroner's hearing, when that became an issue, it was suggested that they were arguing about whether it was a helicopter or an ambulance. That was not been proven, so, you know, we hope that wasn't the case. But regardless, it's irrelevant. The WorkSafe thought it was okay that they waited that time, which we were furious about. Even in the coroner's hearing, we've got them saying, yeah, you know, if they were treating him, but it's just unsatisfactory. And of course, it reinforces what happened at Pike.
You were shattered by Pike River, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, it was the biggest industrial accident you and me will ever see, and there's a lot of responsibility to share around for Pike.
The responsibility didn't settle anywhere. It just flew away. It
was just incredible, wasn't it? And there was a case to answer that. They found that. It's unbelievable that they didn't go ahead with that. And that's not the only thing, actually. What is the Crown's responsibility to these families? They still haven't faced these families and said, we let you down too, and what's our liability? And we're not giving up on them. We're going to keep on going. And what we've learned from Liverpool and what the families got inspired by from Liverpool was keep going, because if you go away, that's what they're waiting for. You know, just keep going, find new angles, keep pushing, and that's what we intend to do.
It's exhausting keeping going, isn't it? I was looking at Sonia Rockhouse and Anna Osborne the other day and thinking they must be so tired after 5.5 years.
It's more exhausting not keeping going, mate. You see, that's the problem. Letting it go is more exhausting. Letting it go is just unacceptable. They won't let it go. And so we've got to support them, because I don't blame them for that. I wouldn't let it go. It was so outrageous. And you know, what are we doing now? Building stuff with bad steel and carrying on? Nothing's learned either.
What would you change if you could, you know, if you were in the wand-waving business?
It's things like that, mate. It's standards. It's about the health and safety stuff on farms. You know, why not reform it and help them to be safe? Why just assume farming is dangerous and we'll exclude them and we'll put up with it? Why does New Zealand do that? These are the things that, you know, I think we need to push back on.
How are you spending your days?
Oh man, I'm flat out. In fact, I've got to try and not be so flat out because, you know, I want to go and spend more time with my mother and all those sorts of things. But
We're not going to swing the camera around and look around the room, but your beautiful son, Dylan,
yeah,
you must be proud of him.
oh, he's adorable, isn't he?
He is. Having just met
A bit
him.
cheeky, but.
And your bro is here.
And my
Max.
brother, yeah, and then I've got a mum, and I've got a lovely husband, so that's sort of we're compact, but.
Except you're not compact. I mean, you are one of the most loved people. Isn't it funny that, you know, 5 years ago...
I know. The
Bloody Helen Kelly, why doesn't she shut up?
I know.
Now people are saying, more Helen Kelly.
Yeah,
We
well,
want
they're saying that around the world with more left-wing politics is what they're calling
No,
it.
no, sorry, I'm talking about you. I'm talking about you particularly, specifically. That's not big picture stuff. That's about you, isn't it?
I don't know, but I'm enjoying the work I'm doing, and I'm really determined to try and finish off a few things, you know.
What things?
Well, I'd like to get this forestry thing really robust, including having a community of advocates that can ring the next workplace death families, not just forestry, but give them advice. So we just had a person last night whose husband was killed in a trucking accident, completely in the dark about what they do. So, you know, these families are looking at setting up an organisation and they'd provide them with the information about WorkSafe and who you can get in touch with, just to provide some support. I'd like to get that up and going so that legacy work of forestry keeps going and there's infrastructure. I'd like to sort out Pike, you know, really hope that decision comes through quickly and we can move forward on that. I don't know what, there's more work to do there, including considering whether we sue the Crown. You know, it's a possibility, we need to get onto that.
Is that a real possibility?
Yep.
It's hard to do, isn't it?
It's expensive. We'd have to get the community support, but we would get it if we have to, unless the Crown is... The Crown may bargain, but, you know, we can't just leave the Crown's questions unanswered. Maybe the Whittle case will give us an opportunity, I don't know. But, you know, we cannot leave Pike as it is. It's just not viable to say, oh, well, move on. We haven't learned enough from it, we haven't changed enough, and we haven't recognise our responsibility enough in it. So I'd like to see some progress on that. And then in farming, we've got to sort out the working conditions of farm workers. You know, they're all being underpaid. When MB go out and inspect, their labour inspectors, 2/3 are not being paid properly, let alone being paid safely or being paid decently, not being paid properly on the minimum code. So those are sort of the three areas I'm putting a lot of energy in, and then this Mr. Tally.
What would you say to Mr. Tally? And we have to be careful of the laws of defamation. What would you say to him?
I don't know, but I tell you what people say to me most is how, why?
What do you mean, how, why?
How is he like that? Why is he like that? I'm not going to explain his behaviour. I don't try and explain politicians' behaviour either. Each person behaves according to their own accountabilities and values, really.
What are your accountabilities and values?
Well, I feel very accountable to the people that pay union fees. You know, they go out at night and stack supermarket shelves and they contribute a little bit of their income, that shitty little income they get, towards being collective and working with their mates and joining together and improving their lot. I really respect that. And that means that money and that energy that they put in has to be reciprocated by us to make sure we're strong and we can deliver. So that's my sort of philosophy. That keeps me going. And I often say, what would the supermarket worker stacking shelves at night think of this activity? You know, would they, if they understood it and understood the politics of it, would they approve of it, or would they think we were pie in the sky? This is sort of a test that I run past me. So that's what sort of accountability is in my view. And then the values of the union movement are so strong about collectivism and about sticking together and the role of work as a contribution to the economy that we make, and the need to have that recognised, yeah.
Respect?
Yep, it's reciprocity, respect. They're all concepts that have to exist in the workplace. Both parties wanting each other to succeed, not just one way. You know, not seeing your labour as a cost, but as a contribution, as a valuable asset. And also as I say, egalitarian families who are here to earn a living, you know. And I really think there's this narrative in New Zealand that you're lucky to have a job, don't bite the hand that feeds you, be grateful. The job creator is a charity giver and you're the charity taker, beneficiary versus benefactor rather than a mutual relationship. And a lot of employers will say to you, oh, it's lucky to have a job, they can quit if they don't like it or whatever. You know, this sort of derogatory misunderstanding of the economic situation, yeah. So I think, you know, it was really interesting once when the minimum wage went up. A couple of McDonald's workers went on the tally and said that it wasn't enough, they couldn't survive. And TV3 ran the headline, 2 workers are prepared to bite the hand that feeds them. Because the narrative is that McDonald's are feeding them, not that they're working hard for McDonald's and being paid low wages and that it's a reciprocal arrangement, but that they're somehow being a charity, being fed. I often pick up those little subtleties and tweet them. I'm a big tweeter. Yeah.
What do you want New Zealand to look like? Like Dylan, who's behind us, your boy, what sort of New Zealand do you want his children to live in and their children to live in?
I'd like to see him in a you know, sort of a more accepting society of people as people, and where we encourage them. Instead we just slap them down, embarrass them, teach them never to stick their head up in the fishing village.
You stuck your head up in the fishing village, haven't you?
Yeah, I do think New Zealand is at risk of behaving like a fishing village. If you're a stranger or you've got a different idea, you're a bit controversial, they'll drive you out of town or be threatened by you or suspicious, you know. And that the fleet owners control all the decisions and the fishermen have to do what they're told. That's how I sort of see it, really. It's not good for us.
Helen Kelly, whose loss was felt by many people throughout the country, but perhaps particularly by the families of the Pike River mine victims who praised her long-term support and commitment to them and to workers' rights and worker safety. Over the past few weeks, the Pike River families have held protests over the permanent sealing of the mine, and last week they went to Parliament in a bid to garner support from new Prime Minister Bill English. That's a work in progress. One of those who travelled to Wellington was Dean Dunbar. Dean's son Joseph was the youngest Pike worker. At 17, he wasn't really officially meant to start work at the mine until the following Monday, but he was so excited he went in on the day of that terrible explosion. I spoke to Dean whilst he picketed with a group of around 60 others on Logburn Road at the gate they could get to that was closest to the mine. He told me he would take flowers to the mine every year on his son's birthday, but this year permission was refused.
Well, I'm going to get up to that portal one way or another today, and I guess if the New Zealand police are going to arrest the father of Joseph Dunbar for going to take flowers to his grave, then I'll stand in a court law and I'll take that. I'll take that hit, John. If that's what's coming, and this is the way that this country is headed, that we're secretly entombing children in the middle of nowhere and denying access for fathers to be with their children, then okay, that's going to send a message to the country, and it'll be loud and clear, I'm sure.
That was about 6:45 this morning. The first people began arriving at the barrier arm that keeps the mine and the outside worlds apart about an hour earlier. Tommy Daly, Milton Osborne's mate, whose friendship endures with a loving singularity.
Yeah, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, we've got 6 people at the moment, and it's only, 6 o'clock, isn't it? That's a good start.
And what's the morning like?
Beautiful West Coast day today.
That was at 6. By 7, the numbers had swollen to 40 or 50. And among those who'd driven inland was Dame Fiona Kidman and her husband Ian, who was sitting at home in Wellington the other night and had one of those moments.
I just looked at the picket line and I thought, this is a lonely group, not enough people here. I mean, these people have been coming here for 6 years and talking for 6 years, and I said to Ian, I think we should be down there.
People often say that, of course, but this week it felt really important.
So we've come.
Pike's not an easy place to get to, 40 minutes inland from Greymouth. You cross the big bridge, then turn east away from the sea, past the turn-off to Blackball, with the history it forged so hard, and up beyond where almost any people are.
We've just driven through this beautiful bush, through the rivers. The dawn was coming up, and now the mountains in front of me with the mist over it, and all this group of people are here for yet another morning, and it's something that touches you really down in your heart. We're both pretty emotional right now.
It's beautiful there, and also because of what happened, it's not. Dean Dunbar hates it now. There's a word he keeps using for it.
Oh, it's a nasty place, John. I don't think it will ever be anything but a nasty place.
The police arrive, and then a few minutes later the solid energy workers. Then a car from Geonet, a local contractor. And on the West Coast you don't cross a picket line if you're a local. Tommy was there.
I mean, everybody was just shaking their heads until they seen the Geonet wagon, and everybody was disgusted. And they just smiled as they went past.
In the background, as we spoke, Bernie Monk was addressing everyone, as he's done so very many times.
And he's just made the announcement that nobody will be going into the mine. Would you like me to put you on to Bernie?
I'd love it. Is that all right? Thanks, Tommy.
Bernie, got a minute?
Bernie does have a minute. He's had 6 years of minutes, never giving up. It's 8 a.m. now, and a small breakthrough has occurred. Dean's been allowed in.
Yeah, Dean and his wife have gone up to place a wreath on behalf of his family and us. We were only allowed 2 people to go up. We asked if we could all go up, but we were refused.
Bernie's son is in the mine, Michael. He was 23, a builder, a rep rugby player in the Heartland Championship for the West Coast, and he was saving his money from Pike to go on his OE with his girlfriend Gemma. They can't even go in to visit him now. They're not sure why. If it's safety, that's confusing, because for years they could go in. And if it's become so risky you can't even approach it now, how can there be workers up there all the time? But words from men in suits have stopped meaning much now. In September 2011, this is what the Prime Minister told the families during a private meeting.
First thing is, I'm here to give you absolute reassurance we're committed to getting the boys out. And nothing's ever changed on that. So when people try and tell you we're not, they're playing, I hate to say it, but they're playing with your emotions.
That wasn't the emotive flush of those early uncertain days, but 10 months after the explosions. And if anyone at that meeting doubted the strength of the PM's commitment, he made it personal.
So you are the number one group that want to get those men out, and quite frankly, I'm number 2, because I want to get them out.
5 and a bit years later, the families do understand that may not happen, but they want to at least try, even if only in the drift, the entrance to the mine. And that's what they were asking for in that meeting with Solid Energy on Wednesday. Put the ceiling on hold.
And sit down with the family's experts for one day. You know, and they just weren't even interested in that. Couldn't believe it.
The morning passes, as 6 years of mornings have, and then Dean Dunbar is back from taking his flowers up.
Ian Judd from Solid Energy stood beside us the whole time we were up there.
Supervised as he visited his son. And what was it like to be back there?
I cried, John. And, it's my time to talk to Joseph. I go right up to the gates inside the portal and we just talk, and I tell him I'm sorry, and, that I'm doing my best, and I'm failing at this stage, but John, you never know what a day can bring. It's a nasty, horrible place of absolute sadness, John, and that's all it is to me. I don't know whether it will always be like that. I hope not, but I get the feeling it will always be like that.
Dean Dunbar, whose 17-year-old boy is in that mountain with the other 28 off limits, locked away, and soon under concrete seal. He wants to get over it, but he can't.
It's just, John, I just miss him, mate, and I want to bring him home. I know he's gone. I know he's never coming back. But I want to bury my boy, John. I want to put him next to his granddad, Paul. And I want to be able to visit him every day in a nice place with nice surroundings, my way.
And that is it from us as we look back over the year on behalf of my really tremendous colleagues who do such brilliant work to bring you Checkpoint every night, and of course Rowan, who is co-presenting with me this week. Have a great night. We'll be back again tomorrow.
RNZ News at 6. Good evening. I'm Paul Brennan. A convicted pedophile is to become subject to the country's first ever public protection order. Glenn Anthony Douglas has completed a 3-year jail sentence for 2 crimes of sexual connection with a 13-year-old boy. Tim Graham reports.
Douglas has been held in interim custody at Otago Prison. Corrections applied to the High Court to indefinitely extend his detention on the grounds that he poses a serious risk to young boys. Public protection orders allow the High Court to detain high-risk individuals until they no longer pose a serious and imminent threat to public safety. In a new judgment, the High Court says there are clear grounds to grant the order against Douglas. It will take effect on January the 10th. Justice Davidson says he's decided the need for protection of potential victims must come first. This is Tim Graham.
A friend of the man in a critical condition following a fatal house fire in Auckland today says he is a very much loved man.